and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We are your sous chef, your baker, and your head garden maker, salad maker. We're whipping you up a fresh story. Dinner is served. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. So I want to do the recap for last week, or do you want me to? All right, so the recap for last week is the world that we live in has a pantheon. The pantheon has a creator, a lot like the Judeo-Christian creator God. He created the world, and he created, were they helpers, Reed? What were they called? Keepers, that's what it was, not helpers. Helpers is not the right word. These were like, imagine them like computer programs given a specific job to do. Some of them more complex, some of them less complex, and some of them with a kind of a sense of self-awareness. These things are everywhere. They control the winds, they control the rivers, they control the animals. There's also a thing called the children of the creator. These are demigods, regular gods, who knows? They're a collection of people who live in kind of an Elysium, kind of a Mount Olympus style area at one of the North Poles. And some of them are very prideful. Some of them are very humble. Some of them have lots of power. Some of them have very little power. But there's like a political game that happens between them pretty much all the time. There is the economic system, which is birds. Lots of different species of birds bred in different subspecies that have lots of different abilities, and they have different there's different reasons why you'd want certain birds. Maybe certain birds are carrier pigeon, better like carrier pigeons. Some of them can lay eggs like chickens. Some of them are very beautiful. Some of them have their organs have medicinal purposes. Some of them are just really pretty. Some of them can mimic human speech. There's like lots of different types. And there's a whole legend and lore behind it where the creator God gave 2 original birds to this hero. He kind of traveled the world with them. They were basically like super power magic beings. And then he, in an attempt to stop a world war, he brought 5 birds, which was their offspring, to the 5 nations and gave them each one of these birds. And then through the years, the interbreeding and intermixing has kind of mixed up and lost some traits, but also gotten other traits that are interesting and unique. I don't remember what the government type was.
It was a military theocratic empire.
A military theocratic empire where there was technically an emperor, but he was chosen by the 3 rulers, the general, the faith ruler, and something else.
Well, so then he'd be chosen as like a representation of the people, or to be minded as like the figurehead of the people, right? But would be chosen by the general and the head priest, right? Who then, once elected, then the emperor would then choose his own general that would then serve under his thing, that would take care of the military. Sometimes he could pick the same one, but ultimately, so that way some amount of power would shift, outside of being a direct like lineage, but then also kind of sharing between 3 aspects of, those respected spaces.
Absolutely. We found out that our hero, or our mainish character, is a bird guy. He's a bird watcher. He's an apiary expert, and he's been sent on a quest. Well, he's been sent to gather and bring the sort of necessary amount of birds of the different origins and subspecies up to the northern area. And up in that northern area, he's supposed to find this Elysium, Mount Olympus, Hall of the Gods and basically offer up unique and interesting bird breed combinations, because the gods, they are cuckoo, pardon the pun, for birds, because of the fact that the birds, when they were originally given to the original hero of in the old legend, they were given to him by the creator. This is a thing that the sons of the gods and daughters of the gods who live in this kind of Elysium world didn't have any hand in, right? This is a thing that there are no keepers dealing with this. This is a direct creator interface with humanity. And so they're very interested in it, because I imagine they kind of don't. I have a theory about the gods, but I want to get past that for now. And then one of the things we had said is that there was a trickster god, kind of a chaos god, who we kind of established that our hero, or this character, this apiary expert, this bird guy, has already drawn the ire of. And Seth, after we were done recording, I believe you had talked a little bit about Job and how like the evil one was able to like go up to heaven, and like God said, "What are you doing? You know, what have you been doing? Walking to and fro among the earth? Well, I submit to you, my servant Job." You know, so I would say it would be interesting if maybe there is a bet going on between some more benevolent of these sons of God, sons and daughters, these children of the God. I don't want to call them gods necessarily, because there's like the creator who's like leagues away from what they can actually accomplish. These are like demigods, basically.
Yeah.
But there's a wager going on between this chaos seeker, who's still welcome back at the Elysium, Mount Olympus, Golden Halls kind of. Goldheim, right? I was getting close to that.
Asgard,
I think
you just about covered him. You know.
Yeah, as I said, as Goldheim. Yeah. That I should have gotten that. But anyways, so we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think that he has been singled out, or the group he's been with has been singled out. That's kind of making this trek, has been singled out by this Chaos Reaper and some other benevolent demigod to like have special I'm pointing my finger, have special see if you can screw him up.
Yeah.
You know, or something like that, like a challenge, not like Job and God in the Bible, but like a challenge, like a bet, a wager, you know, one in which the chaos god goes to work immediately, you know, shipwrecking our hero's ship, and you know, having him have to like lose all of his money and having to start kind of over on this. You would also mention like the Odyssey kind of being blown off course. So the chaos god goes to work immediately. The quote unquote benevolent kind god who made this wager doesn't do anything to help him, right? He's like, I'll make the wager. Yeah. I'm not going to, you know, he doesn't do anything to help him. Does that sound like like a good enough summary of what we talked about last week?
Yeah, pretty good.
I think so.
I wrote down some names. Go ahead.
As far as some of the other setting, I think is, you know, this one country that is mainly, let's say, has in this time kind of the biggest apiary over the birds, right? They were about pushed to extinction, where I think then that gave the rise to this government type, where then they kind of solidified that and pushed back, and now they kind of hold kind of this central location. But unbeknownst to them here is that all the other nations that had just about obliterated them, and they're, let's say, semi at peace with, now that they hold like strong enough power and kind of all the, you know, grip on the economic system with the birds. But what they don't know directly is that almost like most of the rest of the world has emptied out to around the border of their country, right? And so they're kind of always in this state, let's say, partially thinking that all these other countries are much, say, larger because they appear so much larger on their border. But then that's left most of the other world in kind of this chaotic waste where, let's say, kind of like the Odyssey, where as they kind of travel, they, you know, it's, you know, all the different keepers waking up, you know, the different kind of mythical beings or crazy people that, are kind of hermits
right.
alone, and kind of this more fantastic, mystical environment outside of, kind of the closer bonds of the civilization that everybody's familiar with.
That's good. Absolutely. That's a good thing to remember. What story elements did you guys have for this week?
I have anti-hero.
I have famous person.
And I have villain. Dun, dun, dun. I'd love to hear about the famous person, or I could talk about the villain. It's up to you.
I'll go ahead with the famous person.
I mean, I want to hear about the anti-hero too, but I love it when famous person is pulled. That's the only reason why I said that.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. My feelings are not hurt.
Okay, so the famous person, was debating between like two different figures that he could be. One thought would be to bring up, the original guy with the birds, or the kind of the religious figure that, was looked up to at the start, or not at the start of, but when this kind of kingdom re-solidified and took power back over their area. Kind of an upright and astute. So I'm going to lean towards the second one. But kind of as like a morally guiding figure that has become like a household name, right? It's far enough in the past. He's not alive anymore, but everyone kind of will reference him or like bring him up as like a good omen kind of thing. Right. I was trying to think of a name for him, but
this is the religious person?
The religious kind of prophet guy that would have helped instill and start the one apiary country to retake its border. Tauren?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
I think it's Swedish for tower. I've been reading The Dark Tower, folks. It's just the reality of where my brain's at right now.
Okay. So anyways, the thing about him though is, though he's long dead, many people claim that, they'll hear from him in dreams. They might see him, walk through their camp while they're on a journey, kind of quietly, giving input or guidance, to people from that country. So even though he's dead, like they'll kind of like, go, may Tauren go with you kind of idea, as this like kind of prophetic and, morally upright figure, right? As kind of a morally grounding, idea to keep, your mindset on, kind of what's right and true, as you go out either on a campaign or on a journey or, whatever it is. And that, that's kind of what it is. But then there's many reports of, like I said, kind of him showing up and giving direction to people in a dream, or, kind of showing up, from a distance, and kind of seeing, walking, that kind of thing. So kind of, even though he's passed on, there seems to be kind of a mystical continuation of his, presence and aid.
Did he leave any writings?
Maybe he left some writings. I would assume that he did, but, and I would say probably, when our hero sets out, right, he's either a figure that shows up from time to time or shows up at the beginning that kind of gives him a word or a message to, like, not give up, not give into the temptation, stay on course, right? And so kind of throughout it, our hero will kind of fall back on kind of the guidance that he gave, to stay on track and to, not give up and keep the course in what he's supposed to be doing.
Cool. Yeah. My brain, as I continue to think about this more and more, my brain because I know we had kind of said, well, what kind of technology are they at and stuff like that. My brain more and more keeps seeing like Greece, ancient Greece.
Cool.
Yeah. Pillars and vineyards and.
That fits with my anti-hero really well, by the way.
Perfect.
Okay.
So you guys want to hear about the villain?
Mm-hmm.
The villain
No.
is not a person, it's a thing, unfortunately. So, the children of the god, of the creator, those who live on Mount Olympus, the Golden Hall, Elysium, Goldheim, they were not always so. The villain of our story is what's known as the mantle. The mantle is a device. It's could be in lots of different colors. The crafting of it is way beyond anything that people have technology for today. But if you imagine kind of a collar piece, kind of a flat, it goes flat down the chest, probably a couple of inches down, and then it goes over the shoulders, and then that's it. It kind of looks like, if you've seen the Wheel of Time TV show, the Sean Chan, how they had I'm trying to find a picture for how they had the Damane Wheel of Time TV. I'm trying to find a picture. This read. This is what it looks like. I'll send you a picture at some point, Seth. But just Google
Okay.
Wheel of Time TV Sean Chan, and you'll see it. A person has something like they're in their mouth, but it's like goes around the neck and kind of goes around the shoulders, but doesn't go down super far, right?
Okay.
And you can attach clothing to it and stuff. But what attaches most spectacularly, what attaches most exquisitely, what attaches so well that it's almost like it was made to attach, is feathers. These were made in some dark pit. The reality is that the birds of the creator are not. One could say that the birds of the creator are the true children of the creator, right? These are the ones that exist in his place, but they are not him, and therefore they are somewhat infallible. They're somewhat degradable. They're somewhat destroyable. And in the years of turmoil and pain, these cowls were made.
So there's more than one. This isn't the mantle.
There's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And what you could do is you could remove the feathers from a bird and create a covering for yourself to hide your face from your creator, but also to achieve all of the power. So if you put enough feathers on of the birds that could fly high, you could fly. If you put enough feathers on of the bird that lived for 100 years, pretty soon, you put 100 birds on and you're living for 1,000 years. So this is why the gods desire the birds, not because they are great collectors of the creator's work. Now, some of the children of the gods, the demigods, those who reside in Goldheim, are ignorant to this, right? They view their mantles as like a vestment, as a ceremonial thing that they have. They don't understand that it's giving them all of this power because it's just been too long. And they are, in fact, humans from a long time ago who had these mantles and would use them. But the problem is that even though, strictly speaking, you're not going to put it on and immediately be possessed with the devil. No one's heart, how do I say this? It always bends you towards yourself, right? It's like it always is going to bend you towards yourself. In the same way, like the ring from Lord of the Rings, it would hide Frodo from orcs and bad guys, but it was always bending him away from what was good, right? So this mantle, like people aren't just wearing them out in the wild. However, a person has found one. And typically what happens is if you remember the stories of this world, the rise of the new god, where the man would adventure around the world, gaining fame and power, and pretty soon he would ascend to Goldheim. This was a person who found one, put it on, began to understand its use, began to collect power, and then eventually made his way to Goldheim to be included in the other guys. I'm doing air quotes, right? To his rise to deification.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the story of one of those things happening during it, right? So, not a common thief, he can read, but he's a cut purse. He's a brigand. He's somewhat educated. His name is Barlow, and he has finally decided that what they're going to do, he lives on one of these border countries that are like putting their borders up against the one stable country. And what he does is he spends the last of his money, and they're going to travel back to other cities that have been abandoned, 100 years ago, and they're going to loot them. And everyone says they're cursed now, but they're going to loot them, And so in the process of going through this and looting it, with his band of people, he finds, at the bottom of a chest, 10 floors down behind a locked door, he finds one of these mantles, right? And it looks like that. Here, I'll send it to you. I'll share it with you, Seth. But it looks like that, but there's nothing on it. There's no feathers on it. And so he takes it and puts it on and is kind of like, la-di freaking da, look at me, I've got a cool thing on. And like the information about what to do with it and how to activate it is like put into his mind.
Cool. Kind of just download.
Yeah. And so, with just a swift motion, he goes over to their rack of messaging birds, right? And takes one and rips its head off and starts plucking it, and just kind of unceremoniously and really kind of sacrilegiously imbuing himself with the power of the creator, right? And so he starts weaving the feathers in, and and pretty soon he's like as light as a feather, and then and you can kind of custom make your own, but you have to be willing to kill a bird for every time you do this.
Is it, like birds shed their feathers? Is it possible to like build a mantle without with just shed feathers, or do they?
Could be,
or do you have more power?
It could
if you're
be
like slaughter the bird.
It could be that the mantle is based on something else. Something else. It was said that the old hero, right, who had the two birds, that his hair was dreaded out, and that he had feathers woven into his hair. And some say that's what granted him the power. Some say he did that because he was crazy, So I'd say it's possible, but right now what we're looking at is a slow corrupting force, And so his rise to power, one of the things I want to say about his rise to power is that if he isn't stopped in like 10 years, he's just going to be one of the gods, and legends are going to be told about him, and he's going to be and he's going to probably save a bunch of people, right? I'm using air quotes, save a bunch of people. But part of it is that the Goldheim is as much a prison for them as it is a place that it's hard for humans to get to. Because if humans knew what atrocities, 50% of, or probably closer to 70% of the quote unquote gods had accomplished, there would be a war.
If they saw up close kind of the petty and the small, they'd be horrified that their heroes were,
absolutely
less than stellar.
So it's the villain insofar as much as it is going to magnify the villainous nature of Barlow, who is just, a common, he's a devious lowlife. He's still a lowlife. He's not a rich person. He's not a whatever, but it's going to increase his deviousness. He's going to put a bunch of feathers on from a bird that can hide, thinking it'll help him hide. But what it'll really do is like increase his perception and his understanding of like what's moving and how people, and so it's just going to like feed in. And I really want the contrast between the gods in Goldheim and Barlow, because like I said, in about 5 or 10 years, Barlow will make his way to Goldheim, where he will be carefully washed. his mantle will be carefully reorganized so that it doesn't look like a bloody feathers bird. Bird guts, like his entire mob of people who grow, obviously, his legendary army that helped him free the land from the oppressive governments, will all begin to wear feathers and fish and bird bones and guts and do weird rites because they don't really know what it is. Anyways, that is the villain.
That's great.
Who do we got for an anti-hero, Reed?
His name is Jason.
Jason Bourne.
Jason, he's got lands.
And the Argonauts?
Yeah, he is descendant. His family has been in this business. He's a stone cutter by trade, but he's basically trains and employs stone cutters now because he owns lands that include quarries, and he has a stone house that's kind of almost a castle, but it's like on the edge of a seaside cliff face. So if you're picturing, the waves crashing against the rocky shore where slabs of the cliff face have fallen off and it made rubble, it's not exactly a harbor, shall we say. And then, meters above the sea is the top of the cliff, and they're up there, a safe distance back is this house. And anyway, there's a perpendicular to the cliff face is a series of ridges, and one of which the locals have deemed having mythical properties and of the gods, and it is undisturbed. But the story is that one of the keepers is a giant that has fallen asleep and actually is the top of this ridge.
Nice.
Because you can see almost the outline of a kind of a humanoid kind of outline in the rock. But
yeah,
there's been asleep, for time out of mind, as the stories say. And but one of the things that's interesting about the house, he calls it the aviary. I wrote it down as the aviary. I think you guys were using the word apiary, but I think that refers to bees, not.
I think you're probably almost definitely correct. Now that you say aviary,
I think the aviary. Well, anyway, I wrote down this guy's house was the aviary, and it was kind of famous because it was beautiful, but it wasn't very big. But it was, like I say, almost a castle. The thing that was really interesting about the aviary is that it had many sublevels.
Well,
cut down into the rock.
It's called the aviary.
Yes.
Everywhere or just around there?
I think just around there.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the point is, it's got several sub-levels cut down into the rock. Basements, wine cellars, storage places, armories. But as you go down, this cliff face facing the ocean has got fissures and cracks in it and is a haven for birds. So as you go down, you have places within, from the landward side, you can access these havens for birds, and that's why it's called the aviary. And there's a thing about Jason in particular was true of his father and grandfather as well. They just have an affinity for birds, and the aviary tends to attract, shall we say, birds, that were raised, fostered in the wild and were never property of anyone. So you have some wild birds. You also have birds that had quote unquote owners that were abusive, and there's some escapees that have found their ways. And Jason has an affinity for birds. They trust him. He if they come there injured, he tends to them. But and they also give him feathers. It is anyway. And this guy is not. He likes the business of stone cutting. He loves supplying beautiful marble-like building materials for the fancy columns and the stuff for the big buildings and the to be hauled away to the cities. But anyway, this is his home is called the aviary, and he has this sort of mystical relationship with birds, and no one says that he has birds, more like they have him. Does that make any sense? because they've just kind of moved in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I just thought it might have a. I haven't really decided where that would where this. It's just kind of a. I see him as holding a place where he'll probably intervene as life goes on, but he wouldn't choose to step off to be one of the heroes, questing off and creating a name for himself. It's just that he, by virtue of his situation, he's well known, he's wealthy, his product, his quarries are sought after, but he also, it's the economy. He deals in birds, and he is wealthy in that regard too. So that's our anti-hero, Jason.
Excellent.
I think he's got some possibilities.
Excellent. One of the things I wanted to say in the whole world building aspect as we move on to the next, as we've all talked about our story elements, right? Seth, you've talked about yours. Oh my gosh, did I forget you? Okay, good. Oh.
Tauren.
Yes, Tauren. I remember Tauren now. Is that this chaos god entity person has been challenged with our hero as the challengee, as the game piece.
Yeah, I wrote down the hero as Reuben, and called him Cudgel. He was the trickster god. You called him the trickster, which was funny because when I was thinking of him, I was thinking of his brother. His brother Kang was the kind of the keeper, the guardian of Goldheim, and Cudgel was the kind of the rebellious one. But in my mind, as I was fashioning it, I was at, their dad Harmon was Odin, and
right.
Thor. We got Thor as Kang, and Cudgel is Loki. That's sort of where I was going with it. It's kind of funny. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I think there's this back and forth.
Yep.
Right. So at first, our hero gets singled out, shipwrecked, totally off the path that he's supposed to be on. Right. Mm-hmm. But then he gets something. He accomplishes something crazy and powerful. That's what we need to find out. Because then the chaos god who does the betting gives Barlow the mantle, which starts up his whole thing. So I really want the Barlow receiving his mantle to be in response to something that happens to the hero, right? Basically like, well, I'm get a little side piece here off in the background and make sure that even if the hero does everything and I lose my bet, he's going to come home to a nation destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. Because the chaos god is petty, that's just what he is. He's petty. He's a petty god. So
here's my thought on it. So you would have, if this just kind of sets up an idea of how this might take place or what draws the ire of that. Did we have a name for the hero?
I wrote down Reuben last week.
So Reuben inside of that kingdom either shows like great possibility of being chosen as either the new emperor, or my thought was possibly as the next, let's say, religious inheritor, possibly.
Right.
Why I would say the religious inheritor. So I know in the last episode we talked about them bringing birds to the gods. In some of the change or whatever, some of the stuff going on. So what my thought was, instead of that, because now that's almost kind of a counterproductive, semi not good thing, right? Perhaps one of the things that this religious order has would be like a monastery that's close to Goldheim, right? And that's kind of where they have some of their, religious prowess, right? Is that they kind of carry on a tradition of being close to the gods to a certain degree.
Yeah, I could see that.
Gaining having their favor, right? The more virtuous ones, I'll put it that way, right? And so perhaps that's one of the things that the one that's going to inherit the religious side of things is picked from a succession from this monastery, and that's what his future career looks like, right? So that's where he originally is heading off to before he gets shipwrecked.
Okay. Still very incredibly, astute, still a bird person, still a bird guy, still a bird watcher, still all the knowledge and the understanding of that. I could see that being a thing. But we still need to figure out shipwrecked, what does that mean? So let's make a little micro challenge for the next time to have each of us, we'll have our regular story element, but then each of us will come up with one or two little micro adventures, like meeting the Colossus. I mean, what's it called? Meeting the Cyclops, like the Siren, just there's a little tiny things that he could, as he moves out of the civilized place, gets shipwrecked, gets blown off course, he like the Tempest, he goes to the island, in Shakespeare's The Tempest, whatever it is, the three little or two or one little thing that he does, and then we'll string those together next week and we'll say a little bit of it, and then, okay, so he does this thing, and then that thing, and then that leads over here, and then we won't spend a bunch of time on it, but we'll just do a little fill in, and we can, each of us can accomplish something with where we want him to go, based on what little adventure and what he learns and what he accomplishes out of that. Does that make sense?
That sounds fun.
So we'll do our regular story elements, and then that'll be a little challenge to do on top of it, because I oftentimes during these episodes, we have really good ideas, and then we say, and then he learns how to fight and do magic and be the most powerful guy in the world, and then let me get back onto the other idea I had. And it's like, wait. Character development is important.
Yeah.
So let's try and see. I keep forgetting his name. My brain wants to say Ruben.
Ruben, yeah.
Oh, it's Ruben.
We got.
Okay, so I want to see Ruben through the beginnings all the way to wherever we have him end at. So
you came up with Ruben last week. Actually,
I know.
I wrote it down.
I know. But see, I kept thinking, was it Harmon?
Harmon was like the god, the head god in Goldheim.
Right. That's what it was.
Yeah. And yeah.
Okay. Well, does anyone else have any interesting ideas you want to add to this here at the end of all things?
Nope.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better as we explore a bird story. If you would like to contact us about how bad our ideas are, please send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Obviously, you need to address those ones to read.
Thanks.
That's a joke. If you want to give us a comment about how we tell everyone how bad they are, you can address it to me. If you want to give someone a compliment on how beautiful his voice sounds, address that to Seth. Otherwise, you can message us on Twitter at WIGB, and then send us your thoughts and ideas. We'd love to hear them. If you say, okay, we'd love to use them. I can see a world where we let the audience decide make the audience choose which story elements, or give us ideas once the story elements have been chosen. I think that'd be a fun place to be. But that's not where we are. We'll be there, I'm sure, next week or something. Until next week, we'll see you guys later. Don't forget to wait, because it gets better.